Hey guys, welcome back to part 2 of my Spirit dropship build. If you missed part 1, it's in the description below. Now let's get on with it. So for those that missed it, you can see this is how far I got in part 1 of the build. I created the end plate, which is still to be detailed, as well as some of the cladding and also the interior structural wall for the troop bay, as well as some of the interior detailing for the troop bay. As you can see, it's got quite a bend on it. I'm not worried about that because this will be straightened out when we create the roof. So that's what I'm going to do next. And the most important thing about the roof structure is that it follows the lines of the nose cone, so it keeps that shape the full length of the troop bay. I did this by basically stacking some plates together and adding some of these 1x4 sloped purple pieces that also come in the Havoc staff to get the right angle. And as you can see, when I attach it to the part of the wall that I've already got there, it flows almost seamlessly from the upright curved angle of that wall across the top of the roof section. And if I add 3 more pieces to the lower plate, that takes me right to the end of the nose plate, where it then starts to curve again. So I'm going to need curved bricks rather than sloped bricks, but we'll come back to that in a bit. The other important thing is that it has to be strong, because I need it to connect into this wall that I've already built to give the whole troop bay a real strong build. Now that I'm happy with the slope work on top of the plate piece that I created, I now need to connect that plate section into the wall. As you can see, there's a bit of a gap there, so I need to pack that out. I'm going to do that simply by adding more plates, and I'm going to use some additional plates just to cross brace across that, because it's going to be a really long section of roof, so I want it to be as strong as it can. No worries about weight limits here. And once I've put all that on there, I'm just going to basically attach it to the wall just to do a little trial run before I create the rest of the roof. Once I'm happy with that, I can then build the plating for the rest of the roof. And this is what that looks like. There's quite a lot going on underneath here as well, because I've added in some pieces that I'm going to use to continue the detailing of the troop bay, which we'll see very shortly. But once I've got all of this stuck together, all I need to do now is basically attach it to the wall, and that's going to strengthen up the wall and the roof at the same time. And there we go, all attached, nice and seamless, and way stronger than it was before we got to this point. Hopefully now that we've got to this stage, it's becoming obvious how I'm focusing on the structural integrity of the build first, and then I'll put the cladding on after. That can be added at any point. It just means when I do get to that stage, it's not going to collapse in on itself, and hopefully at the end of it, I'll be able to pick it up and it won't just fall to pieces. Before I continue with the roof structure, I just want to finalise some of the interior detailing while I've still got good access to it. If you look at this image here, this is what I'm kind of going for. You can see there's various pipe work and those big round things above each grunt. I want to try and recreate that. So to do so, I started by making some of these little sections up with some of the bars, which are from the Warthog Rally suspension. I had quite a few of these spare, so I decided to have a little play around with them and came up with this. And these basically just attach here, and I get they're not exactly the same as what you saw in the image, but they're close enough and they just look nice, so I decided to go with that. And then for the big round pieces, I went with these. I made these up, and these basically just slot in here. So once I add them to the rest of the individual troop bays, this is what it looks like. Unfortunately, I haven't got enough to finish this bit yet. It's not that I don't have the parts, it's just that I'm unpacking Cybertrucks as I go to get the pieces, and it takes a long time sorting those parts. So I'll add the rest of those at a later date. But there's enough there to get the idea, and I'm really pleased with how this interior is turning out so far. Okay, let's get back to the roof. First off, I'm going to add more of these 1x4 purple slopes, mainly because it's going to add more strength to the edge of the roof section for when I start to build the curved section of roof, which is going to have to attach to this. It's also worth mentioning at this point that this section of the troop bay doesn't move. It's only the lower part of the floor and the side of the troop bay that opens to let troops out. It just folds down. So all of this is going to be rigid and fixed. I'll deal with the grey section of the roof at a later date. But as you can see, once all of those purple slopes are on, already it looks so much nicer. But unfortunately, that was the easy part. The tricky part is dealing with this curved section that has to come off of this part of the roof. Now, if I use these 2x2 gentle slopes like I showed you before, the issue is here, if I connect them directly to these 1x4 slopes, They either sit proud above or short below, and I don't want either of those. I want it to curve a bit more. I don't want that step one way or another. And the other thing is that if I have it coming straight off with just a standard connection, it's going to push it too far out and it's going to ruin the curve that I've got of that nose plate. I want to try and follow the curve of that nose plate. So the idea I came up with to get around this was by using the studded sloped pieces, and I came up with this assembly here. This allows you to alter the angle of building twice whilst giving you a relatively seamless curve. Obviously there is still a step there, but I don't mind it there. I just didn't want it off the edge of those 1x4 slopes. So with the design for that section of the roof finalised, all I had to do was recreate it for the full length of the troop bay, which looks like this. As you can see, just adding a final few tiles to the top section there. And I do recognise it's not perfect, but once it's all attached to the actual body of the troop bay, I think you'll agree that it looks good enough. I'm just adding a couple of additional pieces to the end of this, which will become more apparent as to why they're there later on in the build. And then finally, I wanted to add some detailing, because when you look at the pictures, the whole side of this troop bay isn't all purple. It does have some kind of silver vents in it. And whilst I couldn't create vents, I did come up with this because I felt it gave a similar sort of look to what you see on the actual ship. So by simply using a number of these sloped pieces in silver, I'm able to attach this to the underside of the roof section, and then it simply folds up to join the curve of those purple tiles. And then all that's left to do now is attach it to the underside of the roof structure. And there we go. That's it, attached to the underside of the roof structure. It's actually surprisingly sturdy. It's a bit of a fiddle to get on there, but once it's on, well worth the effort. And this is what it looks like if you reattach that end plate, and I'm sure you'll agree it makes all the difference to what we've got so far, and also makes it unquestionably recognisable as a Bungie era Spirit dropship troop bay. Well, half of it anyway. To round out the video, I want to finalise the roof, so I'm going to work on the grey area of the roof that I said I would do at a later date. I'm going to start by removing the nose cone, simply because it makes it easier to apply bricks to the roof with it not there. I went through a couple of different designs for this grey area. Originally it was fully tiled off and it just didn't look right. It was like a bad toy rather than a good brick built model. So I opted to go with these sloped grey bits with the studs on. I originally used the slope 1x4 grey without the studs on, and it just didn't look as good. The other benefit of having the ones with studs on, it adds detail and texture. It screams out it's a Mega Bloks build, but it also allows you to attach other items to them if you want to. And that's why there is a missing 1x4. It doesn't line up there because I wanted to use these wedge shaped tiles in here. I did run into a bit of a problem because this is what would be classed in the Lego world as an illegal build. Unfortunately, because the angle of these studs, it pushes the tile into the 1x4 slopes on the next row down. So when you try and put this tile on, you can't actually get it to sit down because the 1x4 slopes are in the way. I did find a bit of a dodgy workaround for this. If you simply remove those slopes from the next row down, put the wedged plate on and then put the slopes back in, you can basically push them all down and they all do go back down. Something's obviously not quite right there because the tolerances aren't right. That plate should be sticking into the slopes, but it all seems to hold together. It's not an official build. It's the absolute best I can come up with, and I wasn't prepared to not have this purple angle cutting into the grey area. It was really important for me to have that, so that's the way it is. Dodgy build or not. Moving on, I added some more studded slopes before moving on to some smooth slopes. I'm using the smooth slopes here to replicate a section of the build which is really obvious on the in-game asset, which I'll show you shortly. I did actually originally have these smooth grey slopes in black because it does look a slightly different colour on the in-game model, but the black just didn't look right, so I opted to go back to grey. I can always change it again in the future, but for now I'm going to stick with grey. Also, a quick mention, where I've got those additional 3 studded slopes either side, there's supposed to be 4 there. I correct it in a bit, so if you see it change, that's why. Once that was done, I added these pieces. These are another really obvious feature on the in-game asset, and they actually sit more proud to the rest of it. This grey section in-game looks like it's a multitude of different levels. That's why it's dropped down from the purple. That's intentional. So some sections could be raised up, and that was the other benefit of having some of those slopes smooth and some of them studded. It gives the illusion of different levels and different textures of the build. You'll see I also used some smoky blue transparent pieces in there, just some small 1x2 plates to act as light, because there are a lot of lights on the Spirit, and without having the correct stickers I wasn't really sure which way to go, so I put these in because I felt like they resembled lights well enough. Once I'd done all these, I wanted to create a similar purple taper at the back. This wasn't easy because I wanted a more gentle slope at the back, so this was the best I could come up with. I am missing a few of these pieces again. I just need to strip a Cybertruck, but these 1x4 studded slopes I ran out of, so these should continue all the way to the end of this grey bit. Then I can attach the additional purple slopes in the same manner that I did at the front to the back. At the moment they've just got some temporary pieces in there which do the job, just so you get an idea of what it looks like. And once they were on there, the final part of the roof I wanted to do was to create the angle where it starts to roll back into the inside wall, or the upright wall, that inner cladding, which we'll get onto in the next video. I needed to start curving that round just like I did with that front purple section. I want to marry that up to the front purple section and have it ready, so when I create that cladding on the inside of that troop bay wall, it will just once again mold effortlessly into the roof. Once again, as you can see, I'm building most of these sections in an almost modular fashion, and the reason for this, as I mentioned earlier, is it allows you to just attach it to the frame, as it were. That way, if you do change your mind like I did after I'd made this with a black stripe and I didn't like it, you can change it to grey without feeling like you have to completely rebuild the entire ship. It's far more time effective doing it this way, and that way you can afford to make a few changes along the way. And also, nothing here is 100% guaranteed finished result. I'm still building this as I'm filming it for you, so as we near the end of the build, if I start to see little bits that I'm not happy with, or I see a lot of feedback saying you guys hate a certain bit of it, I may choose to tweak things towards the end of the build. At this stage it's just a case of getting it together, and that's pretty much the roof section finished for now. So here is a side-by-side of what I'm building compared to what I'm using as kind of instructions. It's not exactly the same. I know it's not. It's really tricky with the parts that you've got. And also, I'm not that worried about it being 100% game accurate. This is supposed to be fun. If you worry too much about it being 100% game accurate, you end up tying yourself up in details and you just start to not enjoy the build process because you worry too much about what's wrong with it rather than what's right with it. So far, I'm pretty happy, so I'm going to keep going and we'll see what it turns out like come the end. If you'd like to leave your feedback, by all means do so in the comments. If you've enjoyed the video, please leave a like before you go. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.